The automatic glass door opened amid the hum of air conditioning and the soft sound of suitcase wheels gliding across marble floors. The lobby of Horizon Grand Hotel in downtown Seattle seemed to pause for a moment. The woman walked in, not hurried, not flashy, carrying the calm of someone used to confronting judgmental stares. She wore a black t-shirt, fitted jeans, and an immaculately clean pair of white sneakers. No designer handbag, no assistant at her side, no visible sign she was anyone important. Yet it was this very simplicity that made everyone in the lobby unable to look away. Behind the reception desk, Gregory Vance, the hotel manager, spotted her immediately. He stood upright, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as if facing an anomaly that needed correction. Two other staff, Lauren and Kevin, flanked him. No one smiled, no one offered the usual greeting. They simply scanned her from head to toe with eyes as cold and sharp as blades. Not a word was spoken, not a single question asked, only a silence thick with meaning as if her very presence was a mistake. Gregory did not lower his voice or speak discreetly. He spoke loudly and clearly with no intention of concealing his words, making sure everyone in the lobby heard every syllable. His tone was dry and rigid like a policy printed in black ink. You do not belong here. The words were not a slip of the tongue. They were delivered with intention, as though he had said them many times before. A familiar procedure, cold and without a crack. What he didn't know was that within the next 9 minutes, the woman he just tried to humiliate would bring down the very system he stood behind. And all of it would happen right there in the place he thought he had absolute control over. She walked up to the reception desk, her voice light like wind brushing across a still lake. I have a reservation. Penthouse. Name's Carter. Gregory squinted at her as if facing a joke in poor taste. The penthouse was the highest tier in the hotel. In his mind, a black woman dressed modestly arriving alone simply could not have booked such a room. He made no effort to mask his doubt nor to maintain politeness. Instead of checking the system, he asked a question that revealed everything he was thinking. Are you sure you booked the right hotel? It wasn't a confirmation. It was a veiled dismissal. A soft-spoken rejection wrapped in arrogance. Aisha didn't respond to the insult. She calmly handed over her ID and a sleek black credit card, her expression unchanging. Gregory took the card as if it were something dirty that might stain his fingertips. He showed no attempt to hide his contempt and turned to Lauren, speaking in a low voice that Aisha could still hear. Strange. Looks suspicious. Lauren pressed the button to call security without needing further instruction. Her voice rang out over the intercom, clear and decisive. We have an unverified guest attempting to access the premium floor. Possible fraud. Kevin, standing nearby, nodded like someone who had seen this play out many times. He spoke with disdain. These types are always the same. Fancy cards, fancy names, and gone as soon as we run a check. We don't let them get away with it. Aisha's face didn't change. She had lived through moments like this before, but this time was different. She wasn't here to endure. She wasn't here to seek approval. She was here to end the cycle, and every move the hotel made only brought her plan closer to completion. A few guests began to notice. A woman traveler started recording the scene with her phone. A man next to her began live streaming. They whispered, then spoke louder so others could hear. People need to see this. Not everyone looked away, Not everyone ignored injustice. Elena, a young staff member standing in the corner, looked up. Her eyes met Aisha's for a brief moment. In that flash, something passed between them, recognition unspoken and undeniable. Elena took a small step forward, but a single glance from Gregory made her stop. Aisha didn't say another word. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text. In an office a few buildings away, her assistant received the message immediately. It has begun. Gregory still held the card, spinning it between his fingers like waiting for it to confess. He spoke louder now, making sure the growing crowd could hear. This scam is all too familiar. Flash a high-tier card, then vanish before we call the bank. Not this time. He turned to Kevin, handed him the card, and barked an order. Lock it up. Kevin eagerly took the card, opened the drawer behind the desk, and placed it in a small safe. He slammed it shut with a thud, like sealing away a threat. Then he turned to Aisha, grinning with satisfaction. You're done here. No more tricks left. Aisha didn't move. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She simply said one sentence, calm and firm, cutting through the thickening tension. You will regret this. No one knew that at that very moment, a storm was forming. Not one made of screams or violence, but one born from the absolute calm of a woman who had been pushed to the margins and had now returned with full authority in her hands. The humiliation they believed was their triumph would turn out to be the opening line of one of the most dramatic reversals the Horizon Grand Lobby had ever witnessed. At the age of 24, after a long overnight flight from a conference in New York, Aisha Carter arrived at a small boutique hotel in Atlanta, hoping to get a few hours of rest before her morning meeting. As she approached the front desk, the man behind the counter looked her over from head to toe, his eyes filled with undisguised suspicion. She was dressed in simple athletic wear, her hair tied back, her gaze tired. But more importantly, she was a woman of color, alone. No words were needed. The judgment was already cast. He didn't check her name in the system, didn't ask for a credit card, and simply said a single sentence that she would never forget. You don't look like someone who stays here. That night, she slept in her car. And the next morning, she began drafting the first proposal for the hotel chain she would go on to build one step at a time over nearly a decade. Every rejection, every skeptical glance, every time she was judged by her appearance and skin color, she remembered in perfect detail, not out of hatred, but to never forget what needed to be changed. Now standing in the lobby of the Horizon Grand Hotel, the very one she owned, Aisha felt the all too familiar sting of an old scene. The coldness from the three employees behind the front desk. Gregory's look at her card as though it were a prop in a cheap scam. Everything played out smoothly, as if they had been trained to react precisely this way to a guest who didn't look the part. And though she had experienced such moments many times before, she still felt a deep cut when Kevin declared that her card was now the hotel's property until the bank could verify it. He said it with triumph, his tone that of someone who believed he had just won an important battle. But he didn't understand the battle was never his to fight, and that victory was merely an illusion before the coming storm. While Kevin locked the card in the safe, more guests began to take notice. Sophie, a travel blogger from San Francisco, had turned on her camera and was recording everything. She didn't say much, just whispered to her friend that this needed to be documented. Jacob, her friend, started live streaming. He didn't know the full details, only that he was witnessing something so wrong it couldn't be ignored. Almost instantly, the curious glances of the bystanders shifted into the eyes of witnesses. Gregory kept speaking as if he were still in control. He repeated that this was a familiar trick that they had seen many people try to use fake cards and fake names to deceive the reception staff that the hotel did not tolerate fraud. Every word he uttered sounded like a sentence that had been said for years, applied to those who didn't fit the mold of a luxury guest. But he didn't realize that every word was being recorded, every gesture transmitted to devices, every expression piling up as evidence. Aisha didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to argue. She simply pulled out her phone and tapped on an app that had been programmed in advance. On the other end, Nia's voice came through quickly and precisely like a breath long rehearsed. It's time. No explanation was needed, just confirmation. And the system began to move quietly, like an underground current about to break the surface. Gregory looked at the card inside the safe through the glass and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who believed he had just neutralized a threat. He raised his head and spoke louder, ensuring the lobby could hear him. This hotel is not a place anyone can just walk into and deceive us. We have clear policies. You are not allowed to stay here. You are wasting other people's time. At that moment, a man in a suit standing near the check-in area leaned toward Jacob and asked in a low voice, "Are you filming this?" Jacob nodded, his lens never leaving the staff. Everything was captured. Every look, every gesture, every time Aisha was interrupted, every moment of abused power. A silent storm was gathering, waiting for the exact moment to strike. Lauren stepped out from behind the desk, her steps firm as if she had been assured she was in the right. She didn't say much, just walked over and grabbed Aisha's arm. That gesture, small as it seemed, changed the atmosphere in the lobby instantly. The sound of gasps, of murmurs started to rise. Sophie was the first to shout, her voice no longer soft. She just touched her. Then the chatter spread like a crashing wave. This was no longer a guest being questioned. This was a human being who had just been physically violated. Elena, from a distance, suddenly stepped forward toward the desk. She no longer hesitated. Her gaze was no longer filled with fear, but with the resolve of someone who had decided not to stay on the sidelines any longer. She spoke loudly enough to drown out the surrounding noise. "She's in the system. I saw it this morning." Gregory spun around to face Elena, his face red with anger. "Be quiet, or you'll be fired." But this time, Elena didn't step back. She spoke slowly and clearly, word by word. "I won't lie for you." In that moment, Aisha remained still. She didn't need to prove she was right. She was letting them lead themselves to failure. A failure they couldn't undo because they had written the script themselves. She had merely stayed silent long enough for the truth to appear before everyone standing in that lobby. And then, while Gregory fumed in frustration, Kevin stepped forward, pointed at the safe, and spoke as if he had just captured a criminal. "That card is now company property. Until the bank confirms, you won't be getting it back." The sound of the safe closing rang out like a gong, signaling the start of a battle. But unlike loud and hasty fights, this one began with silence. A silence that did not compromise, did not retreat, and was entirely in control. Surrounded by those trying to use power to cast her aside, Aisha stood there, not saying much, not resisting with words, letting them walk themselves to an end they never saw coming. And in just a few minutes, the truth would be revealed not through speech, but through action. No noise, no drama, only an irreversible change. Aisha did not pull her hand away when Lauren grabbed her. She didn't react the way most people would when feeling disrespected. She simply stood still, her entire being unmoved like a marker in the middle of a storm of judgment. But that very silence spread more powerfully than any resistance. A woman being grabbed wasn't new. A woman being doubted wasn't rare. But a woman who dared to stand still right in the open, letting others see the wrong for themselves, that was something entirely different. Elena moved closer. Her eyes scanned. Lauren then rested on the hand gripping Aisha's. Her voice rang out, no longer that of an employee afraid of losing her job. You are not allowed to touch a guest. That sentence sliced through the last layer of pretense Lauren had been clinging to. She turned back, her anger showing clearly. You don't speak for this hotel. But Elena didn't take a step back. I'm not speaking for anyone. I'm speaking for the truth. Gregory could no longer maintain his composure. His voice rose, strangled with frustration. She's trying to trick us. People like her always think they can bend the rules. But this time his words no longer had weight. They trembled slightly. They lost rhythm under the eyes of the witnesses, because the people watching were no longer just bystanders. They had become evidence. Every glance, every shutter click, every whispered exchange was now part of a growing truth. Aisha lifted her phone to her ear, her voice soft as usual, but now no one dared underestimate her. Record everything, timestamp it. From now on, every word spoken in this lobby will leave a trace. On the other end, Nia responded instantly, recording, system active. At that moment, Jacob, who was still live streaming, shifted his camera toward the safe. He zoomed in on the engraved letters on the card, Carter, VIP. Not a replica, not a prop, a real card, and its rightful owner was being denied by the very place she belonged to. Gregory didn't realize the tides had turned. He still thought a louder voice and years of managerial authority would restore order. He leaned in, lowered his voice with a menacing edge. You're wasting everyone's time. If you don't leave, we will have to escort you out. That was when Lauren stepped forward again, more confident now, thinking she was doing the right thing. She reached out once more. You've been warned. Please leave. As her hand touched Aisha, the entire lobby seemed to freeze. A shock rippled through the air in the form of gasps. Sophie shouted, her camera catching the moment. She just grabbed her. The guest is being forced out. Jacob turned to the guest next to him, asking quietly, "What do you see?" The man answered without hesitation, "I see a guest being treated like a criminal." Elena took another step, now standing right beside Aisha. Her voice no longer trembled. In my 3 years working here, I've seen this happen too many times. Every time someone like her walks in confident, alone, dressed plainly, they get doubted. And when someone questions it, you all say, it's policy. Gregory interrupted. You're causing chaos. I will call security and have both of you removed. But Elena stood firm. She didn't yell. She didn't apologize. She said just one sentence. I won't stay silent anymore. In Aisha's mind, old memories flashed like lightning. She was 16, wearing her Sunday dress, standing in the lobby of a hotel in Charlotte, waiting for her parents. A staff member approached and asked what she was doing there. When she explained he didn't listen, they led her out to the sidewalk, as if she was some stray. She didn't cry, but that feeling clung to her for years. It didn't break her. It built her. Gregory didn't know that. He still thought he was in control. He turned to Kevin, voice cracking. Call security now. But Kevin could see the storm coming. He hesitated. Before he could make the call, Aisha turned to him. Give me my card back, Kevin smirked. Or what? Her voice remained even, not loud, not soft. Then you will never work in the Horizon system another day in your life. No references, no chances, no explanations. Kevin froze. For the first time since everything began, he had no answer. Not out of fear, but because he realized he had crossed a line that could not be undone. Lauren scoffed. You don't speak for Horizon. But Elena spoke up. She does. Gregory turned sharply furious. You're overstepping. You don't even know who she is. But Sophie had already aimed her camera at Aisha, then turned to the crowd. Look at her. Look at how she stands. That is not someone begging for service. That is someone letting you dig your own hole. Aisha's voice dropped each word like a pin. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. Gregory scoffed. You think so? She looked him straight in the eye. It's not what I think, it's what I know. And in that moment, every eye was on her. The woman dismissed because of her outfit, the one doubted because of her skin, the one those 3 staff members thought was just a cheap con. They didn't realize that just one more step would expose the truth in broad daylight. And once it was revealed, no one would be able to hide behind the word policy. No one could say they didn't know, because everyone had seen. And once the truth comes to light, it never returns to the shadows. Kevin held the key to the safe like it was a trophy. He raised it high, so confident he looked like he owned the entire hotel. His voice rang out with theatrical certainty. This card now belongs to the company. We will hold it until verification is complete. At the end of his statement, he turned around and slammed the safe shut with a flourish like a scene straight out of a movie. What Kevin did not realize was that the dry click of that door was not the sound of a good decision. It was the sound of a door closing on him forever. Aisha did not flinch. No movement, no reaction. She did not need to do anything except stand there, because sometimes silence is all it takes for people to truly see the truth. Gregory leaned in again, his voice laced with the false kindness of someone pretending to be generous. You should leave now. Do not make this worse. You are disturbing the other guests. But the people he called guests did not move. They stayed rooted to the spot eyes, fixed phones in hand, their faces no longer curious, but bearing the quiet fury of witnesses who have seen enough. Lauren, emboldened by what she thought was support from her superior, stepped around the reception desk, striding toward Aisha with a determination mixed with nervousness. Her hand reached out, her eyes stretched tight with forced resolve. But this time, As soon as she touched Aisha's shoulder, voices burst from every corner of the lobby. A shout from Sophie, a cry from Jacob, then a rising wave of protest. They were no longer spectators. They had become guardians. One by one, as if coordinated, they stepped forward, placing themselves between Aisha and the staff who thought they still held control. Elena stepped away from the concierge desk. No longer hiding behind her role, she emerged as a witness standing tall beside Aisha. Her voice was clear enough to be undeniable. Do not touch her. This guest has a name in the system. Her booking is valid. Gregory turned his voice sharp and tight. If you speak again, I will have you removed as well. Elena did not retreat. I am not lying. I am not covering up anything anymore. The crowd kept growing. No one left. An older woman pulled her suitcase in front of Lauren, blocking her path to Aisha. A man unplugged his phone charger from the reception counter and joined Elena. They did not know who Aisha was, but they knew enough to recognize that this woman being pushed out did not deserve it. And there was something in the way she stood, in the calm defiance in her eyes, that made everyone realize true power does not come from shouting. It comes from the one who dares to remain silent and from those brave enough to stand beside that silence. Aisha stepped forward, just one small step, eyes locked on Gregory. Her voice came out calm like a final verdict. This lobby belongs to me. It was not a threat, not an empty declaration. It was a plain truth. And in that moment, every sound in the lobby fell quiet, leaving behind a heavy silence hanging in the air. Lauren lowered her head. Kevin stepped back. Gregory blinked as if trying to dig through his memory for a way out. But time had run out. No one was on his side anymore. Silence no longer belonged to power. It had changed hands. He shouted again, desperate and trembling, "Get her out now. She is a fraud." But those nearby did not move. They were not security guards. They were guests. And for the first time in his life, Gregory realized an angry crowd of customers could be more terrifying than an internal audit. He slammed his hand on the counter, pressing the intercom button hard. Kevin's voice echoed across the lobby through the speaker system. All staff be advised, we have an unverified individual in the lobby. No contact, no assistance. Possible fraud risk. And as soon as the announcement ended, another silence followed. It was no longer uncertainty. It was not doubt. Everyone knew exactly what was happening. A young female tourist spoke up. She is not a fraud. We are all recording this. Jacob panned his camera across the room, phones raised high, faces burning with disbelief. A mother whispered to her daughter, "They are going to regret this." Lauren still would not stop. Her hand reached out again. But this time Elena did not just speak. She stepped in front of Aisha. "You will not touch her." Her voice was steady. "And if it comes to that, fire me right here." Gregory was seething. "Do you even know who she is? You are being fooled. Look at what she is wearing. People in penthouses do not wear white sneakers." But now it was Aisha who answered. She looked him in the eyes, calm, like someone who had just finished watching a play. "You keep saying fraud as if it will erase your mistake." Next to her, Elena followed with words as precise as a report. "I saw her name in the system. VIP tag, executive level access, Clear, valid. Gregory protested. Maybe it was hacked. But Sophie cut him off. You really think someone walked in here, hacked your system, and brought hundreds of witnesses with them? Kevin stayed silent. He was still holding the key, but no longer raising it like a symbol of victory. He stepped back, looked around, then glanced toward the safe. A long silence fell. And in that silence, something impossible to hide was revealed. A system had just been cracked wide open, not with force, but with truth. Undeniable, unstoppable, and most of all, no longer hidden behind the excuse of policy. Gregory clenched his fists, trying to keep his voice steady, but every word he spoke carried cracks. You are disturbing the peace. If you do not leave now, I will call the police. That sentence had once made people back down, had once silenced guests, had once been his last resort tool to shut down all opposition. But this time, no one moved. Not a single guest turned to walk away. Instead, the people in the lobby began to shift. Not hurriedly, not chaotically, but as if forming a quiet structure. A woman pulled her suitcase and blocked the back entrance behind the counter. A man pulled out his phone and stood right between Aisha and Gregory. The silence in the lobby was no longer empty. It was preparation. As if everyone understood that if they did nothing, they too were part of the problem. Kevin stepped back, gripping the safe key tighter, his eyes now wavering. Lauren said nothing more, just stood there, her hand still touching the counter like she was clinging to something that was melting away. And Gregory, for the first time since Aisha walked in, could not get another sentence out. He looked around and saw the faces he had once considered outsiders, now staring at him as if reflecting a verdict not yet spoken. Aisha stepped forward, no raised voice, no harsh words. She simply said one line. You just insulted me, seized my property, and denied my identity right in the lobby of a hotel I own. No one dared interrupt her. Gregory opened his mouth, but the words got stuck in the heavy air. From Aisha's phone, Naya's voice came through calmly. Carla is ready, awaiting confirmation. No one knew who Carla was, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was the change in the eyes of those around her. They no longer saw Aisha as a guest being turned away, but as someone reclaiming control that had been stripped from her. Gregory still clung to the last remnants of his authority. This is not how a CEO behaves. You did not follow protocol. You set us up. Aisha looked at him. Her eyes held neither anger nor pity. I did not set anyone up. I walked in like any other guest with a name, a card, and legal rights. You did not need to know who I was to treat me with basic decency. But you made a different choice. And that choice now has consequences. Jacob kept filming. His camera now panned to the guests around, capturing every shifting expression. A man whispered into the lens. She never asked for privilege. She only wanted to be treated like a customer. A woman standing next to Sophie murmured, maybe this is the first time I've seen truth laid bare like this in broad daylight. Gregory flinched at that turning to Lauren and demanding she call corporate. But Lauren had already checked her phone long ago. The system had been locked. All internal access had been revoked. I cannot get in anymore, she whispered, her face pale. Kevin, now near the exit, as if calculating an escape route, also froze as he realized all access had vanished. Elena raised her hand, stopping him from approaching the safe. You are no longer allowed to touch customer property. The silence that followed lasted less than 10 seconds, but it cut deep. Gregory struggled, shouting, "You think this circus act makes you a leader? You are humiliating us in front of everyone." But his voice no longer held power. No one responded. No one agreed. Aisha tilted her head slightly, her gaze stripping the weight from his words. Leadership is not about covering the truth. Leadership is about hearing the voices no one listens to and returning justice to them. An older woman from the seating area spoke up. I reported being denied check-in because of my skin color last spring. You were the one who ignored me. A man added, I was charged double and no one replied until I threatened to sue. Another with a small child beside him spoke in a tight voice. I requested an accessible room. They said none were available, but I saw someone else get that exact room 5 minutes later. Elena stepped forward again. I logged 3 discrimination complaints in the past 2 months. All were dismissed. Gregory approved those reports. Lauren backed toward the wall, eyes wide, unable to say a word. Jacob's camera moved slowly from one person to the next. This silence was no longer a void. It was a verdict. Gregory still would not give up. He said, his voice now hoarse, You are all being manipulated by her. She is putting on a show. But Kevin, silent until now, suddenly spoke quietly, loud enough for everyone to hear. She owns this hotel, does she not? No one answered right away. It was not necessary. The question hung there like a final blow. Sophie turned her camera toward Aisha, whispering, Is that true? Elena spoke. Yes. She is the head of the Horizon Group. No one doubted anymore. No one smirked. Only people standing still, witnessing a system collapse right where it thought itself strongest. And that collapse needed no shouting, no spectacle. It only needed eyes brave enough to see the truth and feet willing to stand on the side of what is right. The moment Elena confirmed that Aisha was the owner of the entire hotel chain, the lobby did not erupt like a dramatic movie scene. No one screamed or broke into chaos. Instead, a strange silence took over, deep and heavy, as if the entire space was bowing before a truth just unveiled. A guest standing near the lounge let out a soft breath. So this hotel belongs to her. A young woman put her suitcase down, her gaze at Aisha, no longer filled with curiosity, but with something close to gratitude. And Gregory stood frozen as if the foundation beneath him had collapsed in a blink. Aisha showed no change in demeanor. She did not smile in triumph or raise her voice in accusation. She simply walked straight behind the reception desk where Gregory still stood as if locked in place. She stopped right in front of him, eyes, steady voice, low and clear. You asked me to leave my own lobby. You held my card like evidence of a crime that never existed. You did all of this without checking the system, without asking my name a second time, simply because you believed I did not belong here. And now, with the truth revealed, I will not let this pass as if it never happened. The phone in her hand lit up. Nia's voice came through steadily, ready to record every decision. Carla is standing by. Aisha did not hesitate. Begin the process. Revoke system access for Gregory Vance, Lauren Hayes, and Kevin Patel immediately. Notify legal with full documentation. Initiate emergency internal protocol. In less than 10 seconds, all 3 of their staff cards were deactivated. Red lights blinked across the reception desk. Lauren looked down at her badge, the red glow casting over her trembling hands. Kevin tried logging into the system, but was met only with error messages. Everything shut down around them, as if they had never existed in this system. No shouting, no guards needed. Just one command from the right person at the right time, and the entire lobby witnessed it as an irreversible milestone. Elena stood behind the counter, then watching Aisha with a mix of admiration and awe. In her eyes was a belief that for the first time, someone was doing the right thing, not to save face, but to restore justice. A nearby guest leaned in to whisper. She didn't just reclaim her rights. She just forced a whole system to change. Gregory began reacting. He slammed his hand on the counter, yelling, "You can't do this. This is not how a hotel operates. This is not how people are fired." Lauren hurried to grab her phone, trying to call HR, but the internal system had blocked her access completely. "I'm locked out," she whispered, as if unable to believe what she was seeing. Kevin stepped toward the safe, intending to retrieve Aisha's card, but Elena stepped in, voice firm. "You no longer have authority over guest property. Stop right there." Kevin halted, his face pale, his arms dropping at his sides. Gregory would not accept it. He turned to Aisha, his voice full of fury. "You don't know how we built this place. Without us, this hotel wouldn't function." But Aisha just shook her head unmoved. "You built nothing. You stood guard at a door and denied those we claimed to serve. You didn't help create anything. You protected a false image." A guest stepped closer, his voice deep but steady. "I once reported discrimination here and got no reply. I sent emails. No one called me back. Turns out I was writing to a system led by you." Another man spoke up. "I was wrongly charged twice, both times denied any resolution." A woman pushing a stroller stepped forward. "I requested a quiet room for my baby. They said it was full. But then I saw someone else get that room minutes later." Each voice added another piece to a long-hidden picture. A system broken not by code, but by mindset. Elena looked at Aisha, her voice low but certain. "I logged 3 reports of discrimination in the last 2 months. None received any response. All were dismissed under Gregory's name." Lauren looked around, her eyes wide with panic. She whispered, "They're turning on us." But this time, no one stood beside her. This was not rebellion. It was the collective awakening of those long ignored. Jacob turned his camera back to the crowd, speaking softly into the mic. "This is no longer a customer service incident. This is a cleansing. And we are witnessing it from within." Gregory tried desperately to hold on to what little power he had left. He rushed the counter, demanding Sophie delete the footage, but a man with glasses stepped in front of him. No one silences the truth today. An older woman beside him raised her phone. "Your face is already on the internet. Don't make yourself more of a joke." Lauren turned to Aisha, voice trembling. "I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't mean to do wrong." But Aisha offered no comfort. She only replied softly, "You didn't just know. You enabled it. You smiled when they insulted me. You stayed silent when they took my card. And now that the truth is out, you don't get to choose again." Gregory turned to face her one last time. "Why didn't you say who you were from the beginning?" Why didn't you prove it? What were you waiting for? Aisha looked him straight in the eye. I don't need you to know who I am to be treated properly. I was waiting to see if I were just another ordinary guest what you would choose to do. And you chose. Her phone lit up again. Carla's voice echoed through the speaker. Termination confirmed. All access has been revoked. Guests, please await further announcements from the new executive team. Every eye turned toward Aisha, but this time there was no doubt, no judgment. Only one thing remained. Silence had ended. And the one who ended it was her. Gregory was still standing there, his face twisted between rage and helplessness. He was no longer giving orders, no longer issuing threats, no longer commanding the kind of voice that could silence a whole lobby. Everything he once associated with personal power had been stripped away piece by piece without mercy. The glowing red key cards, the confirmations from Carla and Nia, the fearless stares from staff and guests alike, they all told a truth he could no longer deny. The game was over. Aisha turned to Elena, her tone as calm as a formal announcement. Temporarily lock the entire check-in system. Pause all guest intake from the previous network. Re-verify every transaction from the past 3 months. Elena didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with steady hands and unwavering eyes. The system shifted. Blue fields turned to processing mode. Not to exact revenge, but to restart, this time without pretense. Aisha didn't stand alone. The guest who had been stunned moments ago now stood in quiet unity. No chanting, no chaos, just presence like a living statement that justice doesn't need to shout. A silver-haired man straightened his suit and stepped into the center of the lobby, looking directly at Aisha. Thank you, he said. Not for doing what's right, but for daring to do it. A young woman turned to Sophie. She didn't come to prove herself. She came to force the powerful to face what they've long ignored. Aisha gave a small nod, her eyes still fixed on the console. The system was now in the hands of someone who should have had control all along. Elena confirmed the suspension of the front desk. All data would be audited. Every transaction approved by Gregory in the last 90 days would be scrutinized. Carla, from the other end, requested the files be sent to the independent grievance department. For the first time in years, the hotel would be held accountable for the words it once dismissed. Meanwhile, Lauren slumped into a chair, hands covering her head. Kevin edged toward the exit, but before he could leave, Elena spoke firmly. You cannot leave until the handover process is complete. Kevin turned back, his eyes dull, stripped of the confidence of someone who once thought he held the final word. Gregory was still there, breathing heavily, unable to grasp how reality had spun so far beyond his control. Aisha met his eyes not with rage, not with contempt, but as someone long underestimated reclaiming what was hers. You once ignored complaints. You smirked when guests spoke up. You told them they didn't meet the standard, but today they are the standard, and no one is standing with you anymore. The elderly woman with the floral shawl, who had kept her distance until now, stepped forward and handed Aisha a card. I was once an HR supervisor for a restaurant chain. I got forced out for defending a girl who faced racial bias. Seeing you here today, it made what happened to me mean something. Aisha accepted the card with steady hands and eyes that seemed to promise something more. The stories once pushed to the margins were finally being brought to the center. Jacob slowly panned his camera, capturing every glance, every expression, every moment of awakening. This news didn't need narration. It was unfolding live. Sophie held her phone low, but the live stream title had changed. CEO reclaims control justice at the hotel lobby. Thousands of comments and shares flooded in beneath. It's time. Unbelievable. She did what the whole system avoided. Carla then confirmed another finding. Previously deleted complaints had been recovered. Gregory hadn't just ignored the concerns. He had altered records before, submitting reports to corporate. The system even logged 2 emails from a former regional manager asking him to ignore guest feedback from non-priority clients. Aisha wasn't surprised. She simply nodded, not because she'd known, but because she had sensed the rot from the moment she walked in. Nia's voice followed in her earpiece. Responses are coming in from Portland, Chicago, and Houston. At least 7 similar cases ignored in the last 3 months. Someone from another branch under Gregory's management wants to testify. This wasn't a one-off incident. It was a systemic pattern, and today it would end. Aisha turned to Elena. Form a task team here in the lobby. Collect all direct guest feedback. Cross-check with records. Every voice will be answered within 48 hours. No automated replies, no empty apologies, only accountability. She faced the guests. If you saw something wrong and weren't heard today, your voice will matter. No applause, no cheers. But the silence was louder than any standing ovation. A little girl standing by the counter looked up and asked her mother, "Who is she?" The mother leaned down and whispered, "She's someone who dared not to stay silent." And that perhaps was the simplest definition of a true leader. Gregory tried to leave, but was stopped by new security staff under fresh instructions. They didn't need to drag him out. They simply asked him to wait for his termination documents. Aisha didn't look back. She had given enough attention to those who misused power. Now her gaze was on those long overlooked. It was time to rebuild from the pieces they left behind. She turned to Elena and asked softly, "Are you ready to carry this position?" Elena didn't answer with a flashy yes. She met her eyes with the steadiness of someone who had walked through fear. "I don't have any other choice." Aisha smiled faintly. "Then from today, you're the acting general manager. Make this a place where no one has to prove they deserve to walk in." There was nothing left to argue. No one left to interrupt. The story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. And this time it would be written by those once told they didn't belong. Aisha stepped up onto the landing in the middle of the hotel lobby. There was no microphone, no stage, no spotlight shining down on her yet. Every eye turned her way. Every whisper fell silent. Those who once doubted, once distanced themselves, once stood by without concern, now quietly moved forward, not to applaud, but simply to be present. No one wanted to be absent. At the very moment the old system collapsed, making way for something more honest, more kind, more real. She did not begin with an apology. Because truth does not need to be patched. It needs to be acknowledged and corrected. She looked at each person, not hurried, not anxious. The silence stretched like a taut string. And then she spoke, not loud, not forceful, but steady and clear. like the first bell of the day. What happened was not an incident. It was the result of a chain of wrong choices legitimized by titles, by authority, by the system. And today, I am not just ending a series of mistakes. I am declaring a new beginning. Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin had been invited to the internal processing area to complete their termination. They did not leave through the main entrance, no longer scan key cards, no longer receive farewells. Their departure had no ceremony. It happened quietly, just like the way they used to ignore every plea that once came their way. Aisha did not look back. She handed everything over to the legal system. There was no need for humiliation. She did not retaliate. She corrected using structure, using process, using transparency. Because nothing is more durable than a firm action done the right way. Elena began her job as the new acting general manager. No sweeping changes hung from banners. She started by sitting down, working directly with the complaints team, reading every line of feedback that had once been ignored. The system was reactivated under full supervision. The old procedures built to filter guests were dismantled. Every transaction would now be re-verified through fairness, not through some invisible priority list. More importantly, no one could reject a guest without recording a written reason that could be reviewed. The guests remained. Some sat quietly watching the changes unfold. Others snapped photos of the new signs displaying independent complaint hotlines. An elderly woman handed Aisha a handkerchief and whispered, "Keep this to remember that you once dared to speak up." A young boy tugged at his mother's hand and asked softly, "Mom, can we stay at this hotel tomorrow?" The mother bent down and replied, "If you find a place where no one is turned away for their skin color or how they dress, then that's the place we should stay." Sophie kept filming, but this time she did not capture confrontation. She recorded Elena's faint smile as she welcomed a new guest. She captured a middle-aged woman being invited to sit down to review a billing error. She filmed an employee wiping the old notice board to replace it with a transparent and public work schedule. That video was uploaded hours later to social media platforms, millions of views. But no one talked about the shock anymore. They talked about how a woman reclaimed control without raising her voice, how a group of people once sidelined now stood at the center, and how a hotel changed not its name, but its entire nature. Jacob adjusted the lens framing Aisha's face as she walked down the hallway. No cameras followed her now, no spotlight needed. Because in the end, what needed to be seen had already been seen. And from here on out, she would let the system speak for itself. There was no need to speak in the name of change. Action would be the strongest confirmation. A man stopped her, handing her an old invoice he had once tried and failed to have reviewed. Aisha took it, handed it to Elena, then turned to him, eyes steady. "We will respond within 2 days. If not, I will call you myself." It did not sound like a promise. And the man smiled, nodded, not walking away in silence like before. Carla sent a message. 82 hidden reports had been retrieved. 16 employees from other branches wanted to submit testimony. 3 partners requested contract reviews. A domino chain had begun to fall, not because it was pushed, but because those who built it were no longer shielded. This time, those in charge were the ones once removed from the board. And they didn't need to break it down. They only needed to flip over each piece of evidence. Elena approached Aisha with a list of tasks for the next 7 days. She said nothing about emotions, did not complain, did not speak of past fears. She simply asked, "Which item should I start with?" Aisha glanced at the list, then smiled gently. Start with the ones they thought no one would notice, the small things. And at those points, justice must be more visible than ever. The last call of the day came from Carla. "I just finished the internal report. The regional general director wants to meet you in person. They are proposing a full restructuring of the chain if you agree to lead," Aisha replied briefly. "Let them come to me as people who need to prove they deserve it, not as people who give orders." That night, the hotel lobby remained lit. Former reception staff were invited back. Those who had been fired for speaking out were reinstated. A janitor was given an award for assisting a guest when no one else stepped up. Everything changed, but not because of a new logo. It changed because those once left behind were now invited to the front. Aisha left the lobby as the clock neared midnight. She was not in a hurry. She did not look back. No need for praise. No need for recognition. Because what she did today was not to be remembered. It was so no one else would ever have to go through what she endured. So no one would knock on the door they had paid for and still be treated like a stranger. And if anyone asked, the answer was always clear. This is not a story about a CEO being kicked out of her own hotel. This is a story about a system that thought itself untouchable, finally being defeated not by power, but by truth. And truth, once acknowledged, can never be locked away again.